The topic this morning is overcoming problems on the spiritual path. And it's a very interesting and very rich topic. I think many people who come onto the spiritual path may discover that their problems actually get worse. And this is almost a reason why I think people don't get on the spiritual path, because I think they know what might be in for them. And it's not that our problems get worse in a particular sense. It is that when we desire freedom from the limitation and the identification with this little self, we are asking God, we are asking the Guru, free me from this limitation. And sometimes that answer comes in the form of challenges to help us to overcome this littleness. And so, this is a good reason not ever to get discouraged. One year I decided my New Year's sort of affirmation and vow was that this year, if I do not repeatedly fail in certain things, then it just means I'm not aiming high enough. I'm not setting the bar high enough for my goals. Because those who never fail, they are not aiming very high. And the spiritual aspirant is aiming very high. We're aiming for divine perfection. And so on the way to that perfection, we have problems, we have obstacles. And so as one who is seriously seeking divine liberation, moksha, divine freedom, one thing, don't identify with our limitation. Identify with our infinite identity with something much bigger than this little self. And also don't identify with the problems. Paramahansa Yogananda often talked and counseled his disciples and his students about overcoming challenges, overcoming obstacles. One thing he said very often, he said that a wrestler does not become strong by fighting weak wrestlers. He becomes strong by fighting strong wrestlers. And so the yogi, the spiritual aspirant, is sometimes given very difficult wrestlers or problems to fight. And it can be very helpful to understand that it's not about the problem itself. It's about developing a particular quality that God, the Guru, Divine Mother, wants us to develop. And so, on the one hand, we, in the end, do need to rely on God's strength, the Guru's strength, divine power. On the other hand, we also have to develop our own strength and willpower in cooperation with that. Many years ago, I was working on Swami Kriyanandaji's staff, and he asked me to fulfill a particular goal in my personal life. And it was something that was very challenging, and he was very clear that he wanted me to do this. And so he asked me, told me, basically I must do this, and so I meditated on how to do it, and I prayed. And I was trying to tune into how I could overcome this and deal with this challenge. About a week later, he came to me and asked me, so, have you done it yet? And I was still praying and meditating on it, and I sort of mumbled and hemmed and hawed and sort of stalled for time and tried to explain what was happening. He said very, very strongly and very, very clearly, one, you must do this. And two, Divine Mother is not going to do it for you. And I thanked him. And I put out the energy and the willpower, and within a couple of days I had dealt with this issue. And I could see that there are times when it's appropriate to pray, to tune into guidance, to draw on divine power, but we also have to act in cooperation with that divine power. Yoganandaji urged his disciples to use and develop willpower and energy and strength, not from an egoic way, but as a way of overcoming the little self, overcoming our limited emotions in a way. What he was really asking us to develop, in the deepest sense, was pranayama, control of the energy, control of the strength, control of the life force. And then using that to lift ourselves up from littleness into divine union. The way we do this is, as our gurus have said, using our willpower in cooperation with divine willpower. And when we act, these energization exercises that many of you here probably know how to do, they are a great tool in learning how to, when we act and whether physically, mentally, or spiritually, to use and tune into divine energy every time that we act. And it's not just something that we do during those exercises, it's something that we can do all day long whenever we are acting and putting out energy in a particular way. So the way to overcome problems is to tune into divine power and to understand and realize that we are not limited to this tiny little self. We are children of light, we are children of the infinite, we are made of infinite energy, power, and joy. Whenever I feel small and little and my obstacles seem big, I remember a story that was told by a disciple and follower of Yoganandaji. His name was Brother Turiyananda. He was a very good friend of Swamiji. And sometime in the 1970s, he was giving a public lecture. And afterwards, he was greeting people outside the door and shaking hands and introducing himself. And a particular woman came up, and she said, "My name is so-and-so, and my father is the President of the United States." And in fact, this was the daughter of the then current President of the United States. And Brother Turiyananda, without missing a beat, without pause, he said, "Hello, my name is Brother Turiyananda. My father is the Lord of the universe." And in fact, his father was and is the Lord of the universe. He didn't have to think of a witty reaction to her comment. He identified with that. And he was a man of great willpower and energy, where you'd see he was turning into divine willpower and energy. So whenever you feel belittled by others, someone who says, well, whether it's a higher caste or the right skin color or anything, they're really limiting themselves into a very small little box. And understand that we are children of the infinite, that our parents are the Lord of the universe, and identify with that and not with littleness. And it may not seem little to be proud of your father being the President of the United States, but in fact, in the end, that is such a trivial little thing, along with all the other things that we identify with. Tune into that divine power in meditation, in service, in activity, in all that we do, and more you will find that that power is flowing through you. There's a friend here in India who told me a very interesting story about how to overcome obstacles on the spiritual path. And it was a good lesson for me. She was going through a period of very intense karma because in the end, problems really, they're karmas. They're just karmas that have been awakened in our life and are appearing at a certain time and that we have to deal with. And she was going through one of these periods that is almost unfair in their intensity of how much she had to deal with. The karmas, the problems, and she's just a very good person in one of these situations that seems unfair. And I think we all go through periods like this. In the middle of this, she had an interview with Swamiji. And I think we all might think, well, if I was in that kind of situation and I had an interview with Swamiji, I might ask him, can you take on some of this karma? Can you remove some of these obstacles? Can you explain why is this happening to me? And there's all these different thoughts. And I imagine she had some of those thoughts along the same lines. And as often happens when we are in the company of a saint, our own consciousness is uplifted and we start to see things from a much higher perspective. And indeed, this happened to her. And so she was talking to Swamiji, and I imagine she told him about some of her problems, and finally, at the end, rather than asking for her problems to be solved, she very simply asked him, Swamiji, would you please give me some of your strength? And he said, yes, I will. And he blessed her and gave her some of his strength. And indeed, she felt his strength and his power, and she was able to deal much more easily with her problems from that position of a more divine strength and energy, rather than from the human perspective, which we all get caught up in our dramas and emotions, and life seems so intense, but then we have a spiritual experience, and all of a sudden we have a much broader perspective on things. And so in the end, this is the way out of problems, is not to identify with the problems and with the littleness. Yes, we're given these things to develop strength and endurance, patience, devotion, kindness, all these different spiritual qualities that God and the Guru want us to develop. But don't identify with the problems, identify with the solution, which is tuning in to divine consciousness, expanding our own consciousness. Master talked about this when he talked about people complaining about their karma. And this is from Swamiji, who heard Master say this to a disciple that was struggling with karmas. Your job for now is to get to God. Don't worry about all the karma you will still have to complete. Let God worry about that. First, destroy in yourself the source of karmic involvement. That source is your attachment to the ego. Once the ego is merged in him, then any actions you perform will no longer revert to yourself. Your actions will be like writing on water. They will leave no trace in the mind. In severing yourself from egoic involvement in any action that you perform, you will have cut the Gordian knot of delusion. This is the state of the Jivan Mukta, one who is free inside, even while living in this world. Being inwardly free, nothing he does can ever affect him again. And so this is the way of the yogi, which is to expand our consciousness from this little self to the divine self. And then all of a sudden, all these gigantic problems become very, very small because of a much higher perspective. And it really doesn't mean that we don't deal with the problems. In fact, we deal with them from a much deeper level, from a level of true divine strength. A good analogy is that if you have a mud puddle and you throw a large rock into that puddle, it creates a huge commotion, a big splash and a big hole in the mud. If you take that same stone and throw it into the ocean, it just makes a little bit of a ripple, and it's absorbed deep into the ocean. And that stone is like our karma. And when we are small and little, and when our whole consciousness is identified with that little mud puddle, which is just the mud puddle of this world and our ego and desires and attachments, when the karma comes in the form of a stone, makes a huge commotion in our emotions, gets us all upset, and it seems like a really, really, really big thing. But when we expand our consciousness and identify less and less with the ego, it's the ocean. The same karma goes into the ocean, and just maybe a little bit of a splash, a little bit of a hiccup in our life, but then we more quickly go on from it. And so the way out of our problems is to understand that the real problem is the identification with this little self that gets caught up in the problems. And this isn't a way of escape because, like I said, we also are given the divine strength, divine courage, divine qualities to be able to deal with these problems. There's a beautiful chant of Yoganandaji's, I am the bubble, make me the sea. And you could, using this analogy of the stone in the puddle, you could say, I am the puddle, make me the sea. Because again, it's our littleness and identification with littleness. That's the real problem on the spiritual path. It's really one problem, is all it is. One of the beauties of Kriya Yoga is the way that it gives us control over the life force. And talking about it on a very yogic perspective, we have a million desires, attachments, and spiritual difficulties. And essentially what this is energy in the astral spine that's going out through the chakras into involvement and engagement in the world. And sometimes it seems like there are just so many of them. There are thousands of these vrittis, these karmas, and it seems overwhelming and impossible to overcome all these hordes of issues and desires and attachments. What Kriya Yoga does is it tells us basically that we only need to win one battle. We don't need to win a million battles. And that one battle is controlling that energy at its source so that we have control of that life force. And when it's trying to go out into involvement and outwardness, we have control and we are able to withdraw it. And we don't need to win a million battles, we only need to win one, which is that battle of pranayama, control of the life force. So this is the power that Kriya Yoga gives one. This is the power that satsang gives us, because we start identifying less and less with this little self. And so all these things that we do, on Sunday satsang, service, seva to others, chanting, spiritual ceremonies, all these things have the same goal of expanding us, expanding our identification from this little self to the divine self. I'll read shortly from the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, stanza 41. In this yoga, there's only that one direction. There's no polar opposite. The reasonings of the undecided mind, caught up as it is in duality, are endlessly variegated and ramified. And Swamiji says about this, Krishna is not only saying that the path to God is undeviatingly straight, but also that one should follow only that path in life. For there are many detours from the search for God in religion also, not to speak of the supreme detour of delusion itself. And then he says how to achieve this. And it's very simple. To desire salvation sincerely, even once, is to enter upon the path to eventual freedom. For all desires must be fulfilled. Even so, this one desire, once entrenched in the heart, cannot but lead eventually to liberation. So whenever we have problems, let's practice these beautiful principles and these teachings that have been given to us. Use the problem not as something that binds us, use it as something that's trying to teach us, but especially draw on the power of the Guru and the power of God, and the power really, in the end, of our own identity with something much greater than this little self. And may we follow these teachings with the seed root of that intense desire for liberation. And in the end, I think that's one of the greatest things that we can work on spiritually, is cultivating that desire for moksha. And we do this by being around other spiritual people, we do this by chanting the name of God, we do this by practicing Kriya Yoga, meditating as much as we can. Yoganandaji said that every time you meditate, you become freer inside, and you actually burn out some karma. And this is really, in the end, Kriya Yoga. Swamiji and Master pointed out many times that Kriya Yoga, every time we practice Kriya, it burns up seeds of karma by this increased and divine energy flowing up and down the astral spine. The Swamiji said something very interesting once. He said that in one divine experience of God as divine bliss, as expansion, he said in that one experience, you burn up a lot more past karma and a lot more problems than you do with Kriya Yoga. Because Kriya Yoga is just a technique that works with that life force of increasing this divine energy in the astral spine. But really that divine experience, much more energy is rising up the spine during that experience and liberating us, freeing us from that bondage, freeing us from our problems. So practice these things, cultivate this desire, and in the end, it's everyone's divine inevitability, as Master used to say, to become one with God. Have that faith, have that courage, have that divine determination, and you'll see, as many people at Ananda we've seen over the many years of a great experiment of practicing these things, that the degree of liberation and freedom is truly awe-inspiring for those who practice these things and stay with it over the years and decades. So may the Master's blessings be with us always. Om Shanti Shanti.